Welcome to a Friday edition of Beyond the Arc. I'm your host, John Gonzalez, and I am joined making his BTA debut from CBSSports.com. It's Colin Ward-Henniger. What's up, man?
What's up, John? How you doing? Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. I was a relief pitcher in college, so I'm used to coming in and saving and/or blowing leads. So we'll see which one happens today.
This is fantastic. I expect that you'll do the save. You'll pull the save. You're not a Craig Kimbrell in my mind. I'm so glad that Baltimore has to deal with that and not Philly this year. But yeah, no Ashley today. No Bill. Bill is on some extravagant retreat with his child. So we had to call in the big guns for a little relief stint here. Very excited to have you, though. Later in the show, we're going to discuss Frank Vogel taking the fall in Phoenix. The Suns are reportedly set to hire Mike Budenholzer. I talked to Jay Wright yesterday about the Nova Knicks. We're going to play some of that, and we're going to preview tonight's playoff games. But first, Cavs and Mavs, even their respective series. We're going to start with the Mavs. They beat the Thunder last night, 119-110. That series is even at 1-1. It snaps a 10-game winning streak for the Thunder. They had won 8 at home in a row. Good shooting night, Colin, for the Mavs. They hit 48.6 from 3, and an unusually rough night from deep from OKC. They don't take a lot in terms of volume, but they're really efficient. They had the highest three-point percentage in the regular season, but just made a third of their shots last night. And here's the big deal. Luka, he was questionable with a knee, had a shooting slump in 4 games prior to last night. He was 5 for 35 from deep. In game 2, he goes for 29, 10 rebounds, 7 assists, and 5 of his 8 from 3. He needed that one.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Luka, he came out and was like, I'm not going to have another bad game. This just isn't happening. In the first quarter, puts up 16 points, knocks down 4 or 5 threes. The Mavs get out to a 13-2 lead. And that's when the Thunder, that's when you know you're in trouble, right? Is when Luka starts having that confidence. He starts having that swagger. And then you see what happens. This is the way this Mavericks team is built, especially offensively, is that once Luka gets going, that's what opens up all the shooters, right? They were getting wide open looks early. And then at that point, it's just a numbers game. Are the Mavs going to be able to knock down threes? And then you see guys like PJ Washington starting to get going. Josh Green came in, hit a couple threes. Tim Hardaway Jr. was huge off the bench. So when Kyrie Irving has 9 points in a game and you win easily, you know things are going well for you.
9 points on 8 shots. Weird Kyrie night. Weird night for the Mavs, and somehow they end up pulling it out. And a big one there, obviously, as you mentioned, was PJ Washington goes for 29-11. It's a playoff career high for him. He had 7 of his 11 threes. Where were you on when they acquired PJ? I was a big PJ fan. I thought it was going to be great. They insert him in, him and Gafford. They really changed the complexion of that defense. I don't think anybody expected him to jack up 11 threes and make 7 of them.
No, I don't think so. I mean, maybe Nico Harrison is sitting there patting himself on the back saying, I saw this one coming the whole way, guys. I mean, I tried to tell you. Yeah. But it's hard to tell with those guys, right? Because PJ Washington was in Charlotte. Daniel Gafford was in Washington. Not winning situations, you have no idea how they're going to respond in a game with this much pressure. And PJ Washington's had some bad games. I think I asked one of our writers, has he actually made a 3 in the playoffs yet? Because it seemed like every time he got an open look, he would miss it. So they needed a game like this from him. He needed a game like this. And now the question is, can you carry that forward in the series? That's going to be the big question.
Can you replicate it? That is a great question. Where were you on this series before we started? I had the Thunder in 7. I think Bill had the Thunder as well, and then Ashley went with the Mavs. We've been bullish on both teams. I think it's going to be a great series, and now that the Mavs have tied it up, they're in control of it. But what did you have?
Yeah, I had Thunder in 7 as well. It was so hard to tell because that first round series against the Pelicans, I'm like, the Thunder win the championship. That's it. They're the best team I've ever seen in my life. I don't care how young they are. But then, see how they play against the team that actually presents some sort of affront to them, because the Pelicans, no offense to them, but they just weren't a matchup that was going to give them any challenge. But you look at the Thunder during the regular season, right? 3rd in offense, 4th in defense. They have the second vote getter in the MVP race. They have the profile of a championship team. The only thing you can really say about them is that they're young and they're inexperienced. And this is where a guy like Kyrie and a guy like Luka have been through all these playoff battles. Luka's still young. You think about what he did in Europe, starting when he was 14, 15 years old. He's played in these high leverage games his entire life. So they do have the experience advantage in terms of the superstars, but I love the way this OKC team is constructed. So I think I'm sticking with them in 7, even after seeing what happened in game 2.
You've come to the right place. I wish the other two were here to hear this, because all season long I was on the Thunder, and all season long they were dismissive, and they said exactly what you said, that, you know, if you're going to knock them for anything, it's that they're young. And I'm like, all right, that's great. Look at what they've produced. Like, look at their numbers. Look at how they keep winning. They've been amazing. SGA has been so consistent. I love the construction of this team. Sam Presti should be GM of the year for the next 100 years. I mean, like, they're so ahead of the curve. Seriously, man, like, they're so young. They're winning right now.
And they'll still be making first-round picks at that time, too.
Thank you. Yes, they've got a zillion picks for the next 20-something years. I mean, like, I said this the other day on Twitter. It makes me so sad. They're what the process was supposed to be. Like, they're a team that they identified young players. Yeah, myself and all of the Philadelphians out there. It sucks because Sam Hinkie was a visionary and he got drummed out of the. I always go off on this like Philadelphia Sixers process tangent, but he got drummed out of the league. This is what could have been in Philly, and instead they're doing it in OKC. You mentioned, maybe potentially some of the holes there. It's that they're young and then they don't rebound well. But that's basically it. They had an off night last night. I expect them to climb back into the series. I do want to ask you, though, I thought something very interesting happened last night that I think we've all been sort of waiting for. And that's, can we have a Josh Giddey conversation?
I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. It's probably a conversation that should have been had a long time ago. It doesn't fit. Everyone knows it doesn't fit. But you have a lot of dynamics with an NBA team, right? So you can't just kind of bench a guy who is supposed to be part of your future, who is, on paper, one of the more talented guys on your team. But just his inability to shoot the ball really hurts that team offensively. And then you look at his major skill sets, handling the ball, setting up teammates, driving, getting into the lane. Those are all things that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander does when he's on the floor. So obviously what you're mentioning is that in the second half, the Thunder started Aaron Wiggins instead of Josh Giddey. This is something they've done during the regular season. That's not always Wiggins. Sometimes it's Isaiah Joe. Sometimes it's Cason Wallace. But I thought Wiggins brought some really good energy. He was getting on the floor. He's getting loose balls. And he did make 49% of his threes this year. Very low volume, like less than 2 per game. But he does provide that spacing a little more than Giddey would. And then that also allows you, if you do decide to make that move in game 3 and bring Giddey off the bench, that allows you to have him as a creator in that second unit, not putting all of that pressure on Jalen Williams to do that when Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is on the bench. So I don't know if he's going to make the move, but I think it's something that is clearly the next move to be made in this series.
We've been barreling towards this all season. Everybody's been talking about it. What are they going to do with Giddey? Are they going to close with Giddey? He was, just to rewind here, he was minus 14 in 8 minutes in the first half. I checked the numbers on that. That turns out to be not good. He was the only starter at that point to be negative in the plus minus. The Mavs were flat out, Colin, hunting him. In the first half, they were 7 for 7 when going at Giddey from the floor. So as you mentioned, then they decided to go with Aaron Wiggins. I'm a Cason Wallace guy, but I understand why they went with Aaron Wiggins, because maybe he provides you with a little bit more offense. But Wiggins finished minus 20 in 11 minutes. I don't know what they do here, not just like for the rest of this series, whether or not they start him or not, because, he started every game that he's played for OKC. And now you're looking at like, okay, are we going to just all of a sudden excise him from the starting rotation in the middle of the playoffs? Dagnall is the coach of the year, but that's a hell of a move to do in the middle of a playoff series in the second round. And then moving forward, what do they do, right? Because as we mentioned, they have this plethora of picks. He's clearly the odd man out. He doesn't really fit. He's got one more year left on his rookie deal. So I'm like super interested in like, what does his second contract look like? And are they even going to keep him around? Do they move him? Sam Quinn, our colleague at CBSSports.com last night, tweeted out that he would like to see him moved on. He said San Antonio would be a nice landing spot for him, although he admitted that that's probably unlikely. But he just thinks that Giddey needs to be a starting point guard instead of an off guard. He doesn't really fit with SGA. What would you do with him?
Yeah, I think you need to trade him. That's easy for me to say sitting here in my office, but I think that
you got a lot of agency in that offense.
That's true, I do, and I got a lot of bobbleheads too. But the Thunder have been known to move up in drafts, and this is known to be a particularly terrible draft, which makes me feel like OKC is like going to zero in on some guy at number 12. And he's going to end up being an absolute stud. So, maybe packaging Giddey with a lower pick to try to move up in the draft and get an asset, something like that. But yeah, clearly, I mean, you've mentioned all the reasons why he gets hunted on defense. He can't shoot. He doesn't extend the floor. He doesn't fit with the other members of the team. It's almost a credit.
He's awesome.
other than that, I'm saying it's almost a credit to him that he's been able to be part of such a, the number one seed in the West with all these things going against him. So very talented guy, very talented player, but I would imagine that the Thunder are going to try their best to move on from him and try to move forward with going in a different direction.
Yeah, not a great game 2 from the Thunder, but I'm still really bullish on them. Real quick before we move on here, they have the brightest future looking forward of any team in the NBA. I mean, there's some other teams that we could throw out there. You got the Wolves, obviously. The Spurs are less accomplished as a team, but they do have Wemby. And then the Rockets were trending up this season. The Celtics are loaded, even though we're going to get to them in a second. They love to play with their food. Where do the Thunder fall for you?
Yeah, for me, it's the Thunder. And it's all the reasons you mentioned, not only what they've been able to do this season, but they have an MVP caliber player in Shea. They have the roster pieces around him. They have Chet, who we haven't even really mentioned yet, who's just kind of a transformational big man in terms of his ability to protect the rim and stretch the floor on the other end. So with all those picks, I think that's the difference maker. You look at a team like Minnesota and you say, wow, they're really good. They got Anthony Edwards, who's probably going to be an MVP in this league at some point. But they don't have that draft capital. In fact, they're owing a lot of picks out in that Rudy Gobert deal. So I think with the combination of their performance, their players that they already have, plus the draft capital, I wouldn't want to be in anyone's shoes except OKC's.
I desperately want an OKC Wolves Western Conference Finals. 1, because I think it would be hyper entertaining. 2, because I think it would be not just a preview of like the future, but it would be, hey, we're here right now. But especially because it would be such a boon for me on this show to have Bill and Ashley sitting there while I talk about the 2 teams that I've been trumpeting all season long and them having to go, oh yeah, you were right. It would be amazing. Game 3 on Saturday in Dallas, by the way. The Mavs are 0-5 in their last 5 game 1s, but have won 3 of those previous 4 series. So I think this is going to be a good one. All right. The other game from last night that tied it up, the Cavs smacked the Celtics on their own floor, 118-94. That series is tied at 1-1. The Celtics, Colin, were 13.5-point favorites in that game. That is the biggest playoff win by a double-digit underdog since 1991. I don't even know if you were born at that time. I was. That is a very long time ago. Donovan Mitchell looked awesome, 29, 7, and 8 shots in the first half, and then he went supernova, hit 5 from deep. He's averaged 35.8 points per game over his last 5 playoff games. He's only the second Cavs player to do that. I'll give you one guess on who the other one is. Donovan Mitchell's been really good. The Cavs won. My question is, what the hell are the Celtics doing?
Yeah, I mean, they're doing what they do every postseason, right? This is the Celtics that we've come to know and love. So, it's funny because I've been trying to do some draft prep, but it's hard to do with all these playoffs going on. So I was like, okay, I'm going to use Celtics games to do draft prep because they shouldn't be close, right? They should be blowouts. And it was a blowout, just in the wrong direction that I thought it would be. So
upside down blowout.
They didn't make threes, and this is going to be the talking point that when the Celtics don't make 3-pointers, they don't win. I think they're like 500 at home in their last 3 postseasons, which is just unfathomable considering how good they've been. So it's really, where do you go from here, right? You get punched in the mouth. Same thing happened in game 2 in the opening round series against Miami. They came back and absolutely stomped them. Now, this Cleveland team is a lot better than that Miami team minus Jimmy Butler and Terry Rozier and all those guys. So you mentioned Donovan Mitchell. Like last year, I'm telling everybody before the playoffs start, hey, watch out for the Cavs. Look, they've got a championship makeup. They got a great defense. They got this guy who goes nuts and scores 50 points, and then they just get absolutely stomped by the Knicks. So I'm not quite ready to go there yet with the Cavs, but this is a good, talented team, especially when Evan Mobley is playing the way that he did in game 2.
Yeah, Evan Mobley's been really good without Jarrett Allen. He had 21, 10, and 5, 2 blocks and a steal, playoff career high in points for him. For some reason, I don't know what JB is doing. There were moments there where he didn't have one of Mobley and Donovan Mitchell on the floor. Like at all times, one of those 2 human beings must be on the floor for the Cavaliers. Like, why are you sitting them when they're easily your 2 best players? My other thing is, I think they've gone as far as they can with this Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen experiment. Like the 2 big man thing, you need to be playing 1 point guard, 3 shooters, and 1 of the bigs. And I like Jarrett Allen a lot. I think he's been good, but the 2 of them together is a wonky fit. I think you just place your money, your bets on Evan Mobley, who's younger, and hope that he can eventually develop something of an outside shot, even though he's been hyper reluctant to do that. And then you move on from Jared Allen, you get whatever you can from him. And you just hope to God that you do something enough, not only in this postseason, but at the beginning of next season, to show Donovan Mitchell, please, Donovan Mitchell, stay in Cleveland, although like that seems increasingly unlikely. But you got to tinker with this thing somehow.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned the kind of cumbersome fit with the big men. How about the guards, right? You also have Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, where Garland really has taken a step back this season. And I don't know if that's, intentional or if it's just him reading the room and saying, look, Donovan Mitchell, this has to be his team if we're going to be successful. But I was a huge Darius Garland guy. I know a lot of people were, and I think he still has that talent. But in order for him to flourish, I think he needs to be that main guy and see how you can go with that. So you mentioned kind of building around Evan Mobley and moving on from Jared Allen. I think if Donovan Mitchell is going to stick around, you might need to think about moving Darius Garland as well, which is a difficult proposition because he's so young and talented. But if you're really trying to win now, I think those are the moves that you kind of have to make going forward in Cleveland.
But all of a sudden, I mean, yeah, he's young and he's talented, but that means that you could probably get a good return on him. And yeah, you have to put all your chips on just praying and trying to convince Donovan Mitchell to stick around. But they pick up a game. As you mentioned, the Celtics, they love to do this. They love to mess around. They took the most threes during the regular season. They made the most threes during the regular season. Last night, just 8 of 35 from deep. Just like such a Missoula ball game where they didn't get up enough threes and then they end up losing. And then Jayson Tatum, he has not – I don't know what's going on with Jayson Tatum. Last night he looked better because his shot still isn't falling, but at least last night he got to the rack. Like I was begging him in game 1 when his shot wasn't falling. He got the multiple switches onto Tristan Thompson, who was still getting minutes in 2024. And he had the first time he switched on to Tristan Thompson in game 1, he had a step back 3. And I'm like, what are you doing, dude? Like your shot's not falling. Get to the rim, try to get something. And if you don't, convert at the rim, you'll get fouled. Last night, at least he did that. However, they lose last night, right? He goes for 25, 7, and 6, and they lose. And afterwards, he has this like weird press conference where he goes, well, everybody likes to call us a super team, but we didn't get coach of the year. We only had 2 all-stars. We didn't have an MVP candidate. And he's like, woe is me. Like, Eeyore, when are we going to have the Jayson Tatum big moment? Because, we talk about him. I was one of the guys who was pumping him up as he should be the 5th guy in the MVP voting. I was wrong. Jalen Brunson deserved it. We have done nothing but talk about other people this postseason. We've talked about Brunson a ton, rightly so. SGA a ton, rightly so. Ant and Joker and Luka and Donovan Mitchell and on and on and on. When are we going to get to Jayson Tatum actually doing something that deserves us going, oh, wow, look at Jayson Tatum?
I think I'm going to put on my Jayson Tatum apologist hat real quick. I might take it off. I might turn it backwards. I don't know. But he's been asked all year to sacrifice, right? And been lauded for sacrificing, saying, hey, we got this team that has all these pieces, all this depth. I don't need to be the guy that's going to go out there and score 30, 35 points every single night. I'm going to let the game come to me. I'm going to use this team that has this incredible
Except in the fourth quarter,
star talent. It's in the fourth quarter.
In fourth quarters, he loves to ISO hero ball.
I mean, that I think is what they need from him in the playoffs, but then you can't knock him on that during the regular season and then get mad at him for not doing it in the playoffs.
I'm doing both.
Yeah, I mean, you can. I'm welcoming that, but I think that look, this league, this is a superstars league. We know that, and the teams that win are the teams that have a guy or 2 who you can go to in the clutch every single time and say, "Here, take the ball, go get us a bucket." Jayson Tatum, for all of his talents, for all his accomplishments, just hasn't been that guy yet in the postseason, and it doesn't look like he's going to be that based on what we've seen this postseason. So then you're looking at the Celtics and saying you have this amazing roster, this amazing team, but what's going to happen during crunch time and close games? And that is really the concern. If you're a Celtics fan, if you're someone who thinks that the Celtics are going to go all the way this time, is that they really haven't solved that problem of clutch offense. So, you can say that Kristaps Porzingis wasn't there. He could get you a couple post-up buckets if you're struggling to score, but obviously we all know that Kristaps Porzingis isn't the answer. It's got to be Jayson Tatum or Jaylen Brown, and so far it's been neither. So they've just been relying on their talent and their depth. We're going to start to need to see Jayson Tatum step up if they're going to turn into this championship team that, despite what Jayson Tatum says, everyone thinks they are.
I was with you. I had my Jayson Tatum apologist hat on all season long, and I took it off. Yeah, that's enough for me. I didn't want to be in a position where I was defending a Boston Celtic player anyway, and I got forced into it because I think he's a really good player. With the exception of, as you mentioned, like the clutch offense just grinds to a halt, and it had during the regular season where they have a really good effective offense, but for whatever reason they get into these tight games, and then all of a sudden it's Jayson Tatum hero ball ISO time, and he was really bad at it. And then we get into the postseason and he can't knock down a shot. His shot, he's in a shooting slump. I don't know. I would like to see more from Jayson Tatum is all I'm saying. Not necessarily on behalf of the Boston Celtics, because I wish nothing but ill upon them and their fan base. I have a lot of Boston Celtics fan friends who are otherwise lovely human beings, but are much like Knicks fans, insufferable. So I don't know. We'll see whether or not Jayson Tatum can tap out of this. Game 3 on Saturday in Cleveland. We'll see what happens out of that. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to discuss the Suns hanging the scapegoat all around poor Frank Vogel. He's out. Mike Budenholzer might be in. That's coming up on Beyond the Arc.
And they're starting to get in the groove. So impressive.
Lock your schedules. Aces are coming to CBS Sports Network.
All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. John Gonzalez and Colin Ward-Henniger making his first ever BTA appearance. We're very excited about that. Be sure to check us out wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can download and subscribe, please, and leave us a review. All right, the Suns, Colin. I guess I want to say I'm not surprised. They didn't have a lot of levers that they could pull here. I don't think this was on Frank Vogel. They won 49 games. The guy has a championship. It was about like roster construction for me and the big three, and I use that in super, super air quotes, not performing. But they had to blame somebody, and it was Frank Vogel. They fired him despite the fact that he had a 5-year deal. They got swept by the Wolves in the first round. They decided he was going to have to take the blame for this. They are reportedly set to hire Mike Budenholzer. What do you think of this?
I think, what the Suns really need as a coach is somebody who's won a title in the last 5 years, somebody who knows how to handle superstar players, and somebody who's been a really good defensive coach over the last few seasons. Oh, wait, that's Frank Vogel. They just fired him. So they just hired a duplicate of the guy that they already had. So, I mean, look, you know how this works.
Somebody's got to take the fall.
Word on the street is that Kevin Durant was kind of checked out, wasn't really listening to Frank Vogel. And once that happens, it's either, it's me or the coach. And obviously they're going to pick Kevin Durant over Frank Vogel. So look, things didn't work out in Phoenix. I was one of those guys that kept saying, hey, if they put it together, and they had these stretches where they'd play 4 or 5 games and you say, oh boy, here they come. This is going to be the team. And that's why they were favored in that first round series against Minnesota. And boy, were we all wrong. They just did not have it. They don't have the depth. They don't have the super.
What do you have in your pocket? You're saying one of us on this show picked the Wolves, and the other one, I guess, was you. And also Bill picked the Suns as well in a famous bet that he lost here on Beyond the Arc. But I was bullish on the Wolves. The Suns, they didn't get it together all season. They were super inconsistent all season. I don't know. I feel like this was a massive failure of roster construction.
Yeah, it really was. And if you're going to have such a thin roster below the superstars have to be supernova, incredible. And they just weren't. And this is, we're counting a few postseasons now where Kevin Durant hasn't been, look, he's Kevin Durant. He's always great, but he hasn't been the crazy, crazy top elite. So if you're looking at this team moving forward, obviously Devin Booker is tremendous. Bradley Beal, what have we really seen from him? These guys can't stay healthy. I don't know what you're doing if you're Mike Budenholzer. What you come in and you look at this roster, or even whatever moves they can make around the fringes over the summer, and you're saying, how are we going to get better next season? So maybe they can design a little more offense, some kind of gimmicky defensive schemes. But when you don't have the personnel, I don't really know what there is to do. But like you said, somebody had to take the blame, and right now it's Frank Vogel.
I mean, that he got 49 wins out of a team that was that inconsistent and that was absolutely beyond awful in the fourth quarter, the worst fourth quarter offense in the NBA by a million miles, doubled up on the next worst team. And then also that he got that team into the middle of the pack defensively. What are we talking about here for poor Frank Vogel? And also, you knew at the end of the season when Frank Vogel was asked about it, and he's like, hey, do you think you're confident that you're going to be back? And he's like, oh yeah, Matt told me, Ishbia told me I'm totally going to be back. I'm like, oh man, start packing your things. You're screwed. Ishbia, by the way, had an unbelievable press conference where he was like, no, everything's good. We didn't play it previously on the show. We absolutely must play it now. This is from the end of the season where Ishbia is like, no, this guy's not falling.
Oh, it's extremely fixable. I mean, let's just be real, although this isn't a cool narrative and the national media really won't want to play it out there, but like ask the other 29 GMs. 26 of them would trade their whole team for our whole team and our draft picks and everything as is. Like, the house is not on fire. We're in great position. It's not hard to fix. It's not like we're like, hey, we don't have enough talent to win a championship. We have enough talent to win a championship, right? Do we have enough continuity? Do we have time together? Like, there's a lot of things we can look at. Do we have like the right leadership in place? Do we have to add some little pieces around? It's not like we don't have people that can score the ball, not that play defense and have one champ. Like, we have all the things. And so, how fixable is it? And I mean, if I read the media, I would think we have a lot of problems. But luckily, I get to spend time with, the best players in the world, in my opinion, the best coaches, GMs, see like all these people, and I get to spend time with our people and say, we're in really great shape, and I wouldn't trade our team or our situation for anyone else's, except for I'd like to be playing right now. But besides that, for like how going into the offseason, I feel great about it. It's not like there's a lot of other teams that have good players that have to re-sign them or they're going to lose them or they're unrestricted free agents. Like our starting five's coming back. I feel very good about it.
Hilariously delusional. Like he gets to spend time with the best
Silicon Valley energy right there.
Oh my God. He gets to spend time with the best coaches. He just fired one of them. It's totally fixable. Is it totally fixable? So here's the thing, because they're going to be second apron capped out next season. As you know, Colin, that restricts how they build their team. They can only bring in minimum contracts. They re-signed Grayson Allen. They can re-sign their own guys. Royce O'Neal probably get a new contract. Fine. But you're hyper limited in what you can bring into a team that is already, as you mentioned, super thin. You can't move Bradley Beal because, as I keep harping on this show, for some unknown reason, they rescued Bradley Beal from Washington, which should have been enough. He should have said, thank you so much. I really appreciate you springing me from the prison that is the Wizards. And instead, they also allowed him to bring his no trade clause with him. Huge mistake. So now you can't move on from Bradley Beal. You don't want to move on from Devin Booker because he's the face of your franchise. He's young and he's in his prime. You traded a ton of capital to get KD away from Brooklyn. Do you really want to move on from KD already? They are incredible. When he says this is fixable, what is he talking about? How?
John, this is the national media narrative that I'm sick of hearing. This is just audacious. How dare you? Yeah. He knows. He's in those rooms. He knows how they're going to fix it. No, I mean, what else is he going to say?
26 other teams.
He made this team. He went out and got Kevin Durant on his first day on the job, and he's got to make sure that he gives the message to the fans that was the right move, even if it wasn't. So, all the things you mentioned, look at the West. This is the problem, right? Even if they're at their absolute peak, you've got OKC coming, you've got Minnesota, Denver's not going anywhere. You've got these teams coming up from the bottom like Houston and San Antonio. So even if they are able to fix this thing and get to a level where they're competent, I still don't see them just walking into any championships. They're going to have to fight against these young, hungry teams. And at this point, I just don't know if the Suns have what it takes.
Third highest cost in the NBA with their payroll and their tax this season. Get bounced in 4 straight in the first round. And Ishbia is like, I love our situation.
Everyone would trade positions with us. Who wouldn't?
I honestly, it's one of the great comedic moments of the last year. And I'm not just talking about in the NBA. I mean, like that could be a stand-up special. All right. I want to talk
roast. There's 2.
That and the Tom Brady roast. Ishbia, chef's kiss, man. That was amazing. All right. I want to talk about, we had Jay Wright on the show yesterday. Jay Wright, our colleague here at CBS Sports. He's awesome. He does college basketball for them. Obviously, former head coach of the Villanova Wildcats. I used to cover him back when both of us were in Philadelphia. Now we're teammates here at CBS. And he hadn't talked about the Nova Knicks until he came on our program yesterday, and he was awesome. And I highly encourage everybody to go check out the full episode. That's in our podcast feed. You can also find it on our YouTube page at Beyond the Arc CBS. But he hit on a bunch of different things yesterday, and I just want to play this one clip because we talked about Jalen Brunson a little bit ago and how, previously I thought that it should be Tatum in the number 5 spot. Brunson ended up in the number 5 spot, and I think rightly so. But he also kind of got snubbed for Team USA. And I asked Jay about it because Jay was an assistant under Pop on the Olympic team and Team USA previously. And here's what he had to say about it.
He was definitely in the mix. I mean, we communicate with those guys all the time, and he is in the mix. it's become USA basketball has become a really difficult challenge for Grant Hill and Sean Ford, who run it, in that you can't have tryouts anymore. You can't tell a guy, you're going to be an alternate, because guys have, they've got so many things going on in their lives. Like they either got to know they're in or they got to be out. So I know he was very, very closely considered. He was a big part of the World Cup team. They probably went with Halliburton just because of a little bit more size in international basketball. It's a different game. His size probably is what just put him over the hump. But I know Jaylen, and he would love to be a part of the Olympic team. And but I know he respects the process that they have to go through to pick the team. And hopefully the next run, he'll be on that squad. Or you never know how this thing goes. Somebody gets hurt. You never know where he is on that roster in USA basketball's mind.
And what a season for Jalen Brunson. That, like, one, he gets his first All-Star nod. Two, he's in the MVP conversation. Now we're talking about, oh, did he get snubbed for Team USA? I mean, especially because of the way Halliburton's been playing post All-Star. I understand what Jay's saying in terms of size. He's a bigger guy. International game is different. But man, wouldn't you like to see I don't know. You tell me. I would have had Jalen Brunson on this team. It's already a loaded team, but I understand what he's saying about Halliburton.
Yeah, I mean, are we still doing the size thing? Is that still a thing in 2024?
I guess.
You're talking about size. Tyrese Halliburton is 120 pounds. I love the guy, but look, if you're talking about, oh, the international game is more physical, he's going to get bullied around way more than Jalen Brunson, who's got a center of gravity that's about an inch off the ground and can get to any spot he wants on the floor. So, who knows when these decisions are ultimately made, but I think, Halliburton had a great first half of the year. He's a more dynamic, kind of electric point guard, gets his teammates involved a little bit more with his passing. But if you're looking for an absolute dog, a guy who's just not going to take no for an answer, Jalen Brunson's clearly that guy. In this playoff series where they're going head to head, it so far at least is really working in Brunson's favor in terms of saying, hey, maybe we should have taken that guy.
Our producer, Aaron, points out that Jalen Brunson is a little bit more ball dominant and he really needs it for himself. And you already have Steph and KD and LeBron and Ant and Embiid and a bunch of like super high usage rate guys. I would counter with this. Jalen Brunson, as Jay mentioned during our conversation, is just an absolute winner and has been everywhere he goes. And he's having an unbelievable season. And I would like to watch him on Team USA. That's my argument. I think it's a pretty good one.
Give me the best players. Just take the best players. We'll figure it out.
Take the best players. We'll figure it out. But the conversation with Jay was absolutely delightful. He's a wonderful human being. We talked about all things Nova Knicks. We ran through, what Josh Hart is like. He's a wild human being, and Dante DiVincenzo and Jalen Brunson. And we asked him all kinds of different questions about the Nova Knicks. So go check that out. As I mentioned, you can find the full interview on our podcast feed and our YouTube page at Beyond the Arc CBS. Please subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment, all that good stuff. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to preview those two games tonight involving the Nova Knicks and the Pacers. And then also, who else do we have tonight? Oh, yeah, the Nuggets and the Wolves. That's coming up right here on Beyond the Arc.
Golf's brightest stars head to the Bluegrass State for the second major of the season, the PGA Championship, May 18th and 19th on CBS.
All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc on a Friday, wrapping up the show with Colin Ward-Henniger, who's been kind enough to join us. Let's start with the Knicks and the Pacers. Knicks are up 2-0 in that series. Pacers are actually favored tonight by 7.5. Brunson is questionable with a foot injury. He went for 29 the other night on 1 foot. Really remarkable. Really my guy, Jalen Brunson. I'm going to claim him now. But he didn't, he got bounced out of the first half, and everybody was like freaking out about it. And then he comes back Willis Reed style, ends up with 29 points in that game. He was remarkable. OG Anunoby was sort of the reverse. He was awesome in the first half. And then in the second half, he ends up with a hamstring injury. He leaves, doesn't return. Now he's already been ruled out. How worried should the Knicks be about these injuries? They got a lot of them.
I mean, for any other team, I'd be really worried. But for some reason, the Knicks, it doesn't really seem to matter. They just continue to go out there and dominate no matter who's on the floor. And I wouldn't say dominate, but,
win. They win.
Compete every single night. And that's the Thibodeau mentality, right?
Yeah, I mean, they do. That is the Thibodeau mentality. But I do want to say, like, you, and I'm sure you as well, but I for sure love to like laugh about Tibbs shortening his rotations. And like, we all know that he loves to run his guys into the ground, but we're reaching a point of critical mass here. And I just want to throw this out. I'm not saying there's correlation or causation here, but OG Anunoby, before he got hurt, averaged 46 minutes over those previous 4 games. He had never played that much in his, look at your eyes. He had never played that much in his career. In 4 of the last 5 seasons, he failed to play more than 50 games. He was playing, and he was already hurt earlier this season. He's playing a ton. Tibbs loves to do this. He loves to play his starters massive minutes, but like, you know, at some point, maybe you need to ease off the throttle with a guy who has injury history.
Yeah, Luol Deng has entered the chat. He's basically
right. I mean, like all of a sudden, he's going to dust off Taj Gibson. Like,
yeah. So I mean, yes, but last week a lot of people were praising the Knicks for not embracing the load management. See, he played his guys big minutes in the regular season, and look how ready they are for the playoffs. So it does kind of cut both ways. But if you just think about it, you know, the more minutes you're on the floor, the more opportunity there is for injury. That is a fact, and but it is a concern. And Thibodeau shortening the rotation. You know, Deuce McBride has a great game, and then maybe he doesn't even play the next game, or he plays 5 minutes and comes out. They're going to need someone to step up in Anunoby's absence. I mean, he was the guy who carried the Knicks in that first half when Brunson was hurt. Now they're going to need somebody on a team that already lacks creation outside of Jalen Brunson. They're going to need Dante DiVincenzo to step up. Maybe they dust off Alec Burks, get him out there, a guy who we know can get buckets over the course of his career. But, you know, it's going to be, if Brunson plays, which I expect he probably will, because, you know, he would need his foot amputated to not get out there. It's going to be a lot of Brunson, a lot of minutes, and a lot of stress on that foot.
Yeah, I mean, they're thin and getting thinner. No Mitchell Robinson, no Boyan. They're going to have to throw Precious out there a lot more. McBride, as you mentioned, Alec Burks, anyone. We're getting to the point now where, like, we're heading for, like, Tom Thibodeau as Gene Hackman in Hoosiers. He's going to have 4 guys out there, and the ref's going to say, you only have 4 guys out there. And he's going to be like, my team's on the floor. We're going with 3-4 guys, and that's just going to be it. What do the Pacers do before we move on to the other series? What do the Pacers do? Is there any way for them to potentially slow down Brunson? I mean, he's been awesome this postseason. He's been awesome all season. TJ McConnell was actually okay against him. He was plus 10 in 23 minutes in game 2. They didn't have him out there late. I actually like when they go double guard with him and Halliburton. But is there any chance of them slowing down Brunson?
Yeah, I think, I mean, you know, maybe a little more McConnell. I think, to me, that might be a little overblown, and people are acting like he's this absolute stopper, you know, like Tony Allen in time or something. And yeah, he can slow him down, he pick him up full court, do all the things that kind of harass him. But Brunson's seen all that stuff before. It's not going to slow him down over the course of a game. I think really what the answer is to trap him, get the ball out of his hands. They tried that during the 4th quarter in game 2, and it just didn't work. The rotations weren't solid. The Knicks got a lot of open threes and dunks, and that also opens you up for all the offensive rebounding that the Knicks are so great at in those 4-on-3 situations. So I think they just, you know, especially with no Anunoby, make someone else beat you, try to get the ball out of his hands, see how that goes. Ultimately, Brunson, as we talked about, is just going to do what he wants to do on the floor. For some reason, you just cannot stop him these days. But I think that's the answer, is to try to get the ball out of his hands and just hope the other guys aren't able to step up.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. TJ isn't, you know, a defensive stopper proper. What he is, though, is like a hyper spaz, right? I mean, like, I love him. I covered him in Philadelphia. He's just like all energy and all effort. Like, he's like the Deadpool. It's maximum effort all the time. Like, he's just out there running around like a crazy person. I am, before we move on, I mentioned this to Chris Walker on yesterday's show, and he said he likes the way that the Knicks are playing in terms of like trying to beat the Pacers at their own game, right? The Pacers love to play fast. They were second in pace this season. Knicks were somehow last during the regular season. And I get that the Pacers are a bad defensive team. There's a 2nd worst defensive rating behind only the Suns this postseason. But is it surprising to you at all that the Knicks are playing very fast? And they put up 130 points in the 2nd game. It blows my mind.
Yeah, it is surprising. And one of the reasons I picked the Knicks, I think I picked them in 5, was that I thought they were going to slow down. I said, you know, I think the Knicks are going to have an easier time bringing the Pacers down to their pace than the Pacers will have bringing the Knicks up to their pace. And so far, the Knicks are like, all right, you want to play fast? We got shooters. We got one of the best offensive players in the league. Let's do it. let's have a shootout. So I do think, the series tend to slow down as the teams get to know each other a little bit better. So I think that also works in the Knicks' favor. But if you're the Pacers, this is your game. You've gotten beaten in 2 games, but you can't change now. You got to keep pushing the pace, trying to get those open threes, let Halliburton do his thing. Halliburton needs to be more aggressive. We saw it in the first half of game 2, and they look great. And then in the second half, I think he had 1 shot or 2 shots in the third quarter, and that's when the Knicks made their move. So we talked about Halliburton versus Brunson in Team USA. He's going to have to establish himself as being, maybe not on Brunson's level, but at least close to it if the Pacers are going to have any chance in this series.
1000%. And I get, and Chris made this point yesterday that, Halliburton's game isn't necessarily, I'm just going to get mine. I get that he's an awesome facilitator, but they needed that in the second half. He disappeared until like late in the third quarter. He didn't have a field goal until like 3 minutes left in the third period. And I was like, what are you doing, dude? You had 22 in the first half. They need you to step up. So game 3 tonight, as I mentioned, the Pacers are favored. We'll see if they can get one off the Knicks. And then the other game 3 tonight, talking about seeing if they can get a game here, Nuggets and the Wolves. I was super excited for this series. Wolves come out and smack Denver to take a 2-0 lead, beat them twice on their own floor, and their favorite at home tonight by 4.5. Joker got his 3rd MVP in 4 years the other night. He shot 59% from the floor against the Lakers in the first round, Colin. Just 42% so far against the Wolves. He needs to be better. Jamal Murray needs to be better and less petulant. He got fined for throwing something on the floor, but not suspended. What do you make of the Nuggets right now? Can they climb back into this thing? I'm kind of shocked by how this series has gone so far.
I think shocked is a great word. It kind of reminds me of the Warriors series against the Kings last year, where I was covering that series, and the whole time I'm thinking, oh, they're the Warriors. They're coming off a championship. They got Steph Curry. They'll figure it out. And then as the series went along, you just started to realize this Kings team, they're just better. They're more physical. They're faster. They want it more. Obviously, the Warriors ended up winning that series thanks to Steph's 50-point game. But that's what the Nuggets are going to need. I think if you look at these two teams, what we've seen in the first 2 games, Minnesota's the better team. They have Anthony Edwards. They have a defense that's just, it's so uncomfortable to watch. I'm sitting there. It's like when you're in a movie theater by yourself and someone walks in and they can sit anywhere, but they sit right next to you. And it's just super uncomfortable the whole time. And like you look over, and it's just like Jaden McDaniels staring you in the face. They're everywhere. They're in Jamal Murray's jersey. So the whole time I'm thinking, and the reason why I picked the Nuggets in this series is like in crunch time, they have Jokic and Murray, the 2 best players who have been doing this for years. And they're just eventually they're going to win out. I just don't know if that's going to happen against this Minnesota defense. This seems like a matchup. And, Tim Connolly, who kind of built this Nuggets team, also built this Timberwolves team to beat the Nuggets. They seem like they're so well suited to play against Denver. So it's going to take some heroics from Jokic and Murray for Denver to get back in the series.
Murray is usually awesome during the postseason. He averages 7.5 points more in the postseason than he does in the regular season over his career. Aside from those 2 shots against the Lakers, he's been bad this postseason. And part of that is he's not played well. And part of that is exactly what you mentioned about that Wolves defense, where, there have been multiple moments where they have been all over him, just like in his jersey. Nickeil Alexander-Walker and McDaniels picking him up together full court, where he's having a problem just getting the ball over so there's not a backcourt violation. Making him work for every inch all game long has got to be not only frustrating, but really fatiguing. They are making him work for all of it, and it has not worked out well for him at all. I do want to say, just between us, we're in the trust tree now because Ashley and Bill aren't here. I have been extremely bullish on the Wolves all season. They were less so. I didn't think they'd be this good, though. We talk about defense wins championships, the old cliche, whatever. It hasn't really been true over the last few years. You have to have a really good offense in the NBA to be successful, but this model for the Wolves really works. I'm staggered by how Anthony Edwards obviously has stepped forward and put his hand up as not just the future of the NBA, but a guy who's here right now. And then the 2 bigs obviously have figured out how to work together. And then they're so deep because you got Nas as a 6-man bringing him off the bench. And this whole thing is just, it works so well in the postseason that it's kind of hard to believe it. And it's been fun. They're extremely fun to watch.
And if you ask Chris Finch what the key to all this is, he's going to tell you Mike Conley, a guy you haven't even mentioned yet. So that tells you how deep they are.
Well,
he just kind of brings everything together. This was a team that was kind of, you know, a little fractured, a little ego-ish. And when they traded for Mike Conley, he immediately solved all that stuff, a guy who guards and defends. But to me, you know, I mentioned the clutch thing with Denver. I figure, okay, in the clutch, they're going to be better. That was one of Minnesota's problems during the regular seasons. Their clutch offense was really bad. All of a sudden, Anthony Edwards decides he's going to be Michael Jordan and just never miss shots in the clutch. So now you add that component to a team that was already the best defense in the league, already has shooting, already has spacing, length, size. I agree with you. I didn't buy it during the regular season. I wasn't saying they were going to be bad, but, you know, I picked Phoenix. I thought, all right, this isn't going to last in the postseason. I am very wrong, and this team is much better than I think anyone probably expected.
Yeah, I mean, I was all over them all season, but I didn't think that they would be up 2-0 after winning 2 games in Denver on the defending champs floor. That's kind of wild, but I am very much looking forward to tonight's game as well, and we'll see if the Nuggets can get back into it. Before we go, because we're going to wrap up the show now, what do you got cooking? What can people read on CBSSports.com from you?
Yeah, just moving on with the playoff coverage. We're doing live blogs every night. So if you want to check out, you know, our kind of up to the minute analysis on every single game, we'll be in there. And then, as I mentioned, doing some draft stuff. We got the lottery coming up on Sunday. So once that happens, I'll be having some mock drafts out there for anybody who's interested in that sort of thing.
I will, we'll have to have you back on around the draft time, because I know nothing about the draft. I don't have the RAM for it. I can only watch. There's too much professional basketball. I cannot be tasked with following international and college basketball. So you'll have to be our correspondent for that. We'll have you back on that. And also during the regular season, I got to give you credit. Your delightfully unhinged power rankings are just a joy, man. Those things are so great. We're going to have you on to talk about those too.
It's not a bit. All right. Those are serious rankings that need to be taken seriously.
I take them seriously. They're so fun. One week you had the Bucks at 14, and then the next week you had them at 1. And I was like, this guy's amazing. Colin Ward-Henniger, this was so fun. Thank you for joining us. The
magic of weekly rankings.
The magic of weekly rankings. We're definitely going to have you back. That's it for us for right now, though. We're going to be back on Monday with Ashley and Bill. But for now, for Colin, I'm John. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. Have a great weekend.